really random. I got offered a job to develop Australia's first ever human-grade fish oil capsule out of salmon waste.
G'day and welcome to the Farms Advice podcast with your host, Jack Creswell. Whether you farm it, service it, or just love it, this podcast is for you. We'll bring you the techniques and technologies you can implement into your day straight from the leaders and innovators themselves. Spread the Farms Advice so that we can reach more farmers right across Australia. Follow us on all of your socials at Farms Advice, and let's get into this episode. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. For this episode, very exciting to have Will Bignell on from down in Tasmania. We haven't had too many Tassie farmers on, but we're welcoming more. So if you know one, let us know. But really keen to get into this conversation, and I think you might get a few key takeaways from it too that implement into your mindset or even onto your own farm. See what you can do. Pull some similarities out of this episode, but we'll leave it to Will on the episode. Let's get into it. G'day and welcome to the Farms Advice podcast. Will Bignell, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. If anyone follows him, he's got few followers on there. Just over 5,000 for Thorpe Farm. So Will, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much for having me, Jack.
Absolutely. So tell the listeners where you're coming from, because we don't always get people from your region. We'd love some more, but whereabouts are you from, Will?
Yeah, so I'm at a place called Bothwell, which is in the middle of Tasmania in the Highlands. So it might only be sort of 360 metres above sea level, but we stick our head up into the roaring 40s. So we don't get the buffer of Western Australia and South Australia. So we get sort of extreme temperatures from -12 right through to the 45-degree days straight off the desert. And yeah, an interesting site. So I'm kind of halfway between Hobart and Launceston. And it's, long-held sort of farming country with a mixture of irrigation for nearly 200 years and livestock and diversified cropping now.
Yeah, beautiful. And to get stuck into it, it says 7th generation on your Instagram. That would be the most generations I've had on the podcast. That's a bit of a good stint there.
Yeah, we've been lucky in that regard, I suppose. It's next year will be our 200th year on the farm. So we've got the diary extracts of old Archibald McDowell turning up and talking about going across the square flats and sneaking his way around to his new land. The district was set up quite well by the Scots. Yep. So the guy, Captain Wood, was reading the shipping logs and saw this name. He says, "Oh, do you know Robert McDowell?" And he said, "That's my brother." He said, "Oh, a bit of land up here. Why don't you come up and have a look about?" There's a bloke called Captain Socket was leaving. So they came up, camped in a mud hut for 3 or 4 nights, and then came onto the title, what was called Logan at the time. And yeah, we've been there ever since. So the current generation, the farm came through my grandmother's line. The Bignell family are actually in Hobart as dairy farmers on the other side of the river, which is all now housing. The homestead's still there, but yeah, the cousins have gone down to the ocean, down at Rim Creek. And we came up to Bothwell. My grandfather married a Campbell, and she came with a few thousand acres, and off they went and had a pretty aggressive career together farming. They did a lot. Unreal.
And to hold that in the family, it's not an easy feat as well, like all the way through. The farm that you operate on today, that's the one that you've carried for so long.
Yeah, yep. So I've got cousins all around me, and through marriages and things, they've all shifted boundaries slightly, and original titles and stuff have moved. But yeah, continuously farmed here as an entity. Apparently we're one of the 10 oldest businesses or something like that in Australia, like continuously operated, but that just means we've got a lot of junk lying around. There's been no clearing sales.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned on Instagram before, you had like a bit of a walkthrough where people could come through and see the history of the region. And was the homestead or one of the older homestead shearing sheds or something to do with that?
We've got a lot of the old buildings are still there, and then we've got a watermill on the property. So that was commissioned in 1823. So that's 200 years old this year. Right. Still has all its original workings. So the town had its 200th anniversary, and we opened the mill up, and we used to run farm tours and had a catering business and a few other things. And took people back through the mill and showed them all the sites. And it's quite unique because it's all there. It hasn't been gutted and turned into a boutique hotel or a whiskey distillery or something. So
Yeah,
it's
trend setting. No, good stuff. So let's get down to some agribusiness. We heard a bit of your family history and everything, but what's your background? You've actually got doctor in front of your name, I saw earlier.
yeah, got heavily educated. So I finished school up here in Bothwell and then down to boarding school, the usual routine that everyone goes through. Had a year off after that, signed up for the Air Force, wanted to go flying crop dusters or fighter jets or something. I love my flying. Hadn't told my parents, kind of got caught out on that a bit by the Air Force recruiters. And I thought, oh, better get into university. And I couldn't actually get into uni for ag science. So I did a chemistry bridging program through a good mentor and got into uni and did a Bachelor of Ag Science. Found it a challenging journey at first, so I worked out sort of how my brain works and some learning disability stuff. Yeah. And then it kind of all clicked for me by the end of third year. So I got into fourth year and had a good run and kind of went from sort of failing to first class honours. And then I came home 07. I came home in the Millennium Drought when I finished school. And when I finished uni, I came home to another bloody drought. So it was a challenge. I came home and then sort of wanted to do something with my head. And the PhD option came up with some flexibility, started looking at muscle stuff, and then ended up enhancing long-chain omega-3 by genetics and diet. So molecular genetics focus and oil chemistry, and bred my own nucleus flock, full data set, massive amount of data, and then consolidated a huge amount of data, and then did some powerful genetic style analysis against it to try and find molecular markers to boost the level of long-chain omega-3 in lamb, which is now you see on all our advertising as a dietary source. So my work sort of helped feed into that with the other organisations. It was an interesting journey out of that. So that got me the PhD, probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm not a classic academic by any stretch. Kind of like an ADHD mind where I can hyper-focus on things. But yeah, if it's not interesting, writing a paper or something's hard work. But got through that, and then kind of my brother was killed right at the end of it, and that kind of switched around my perspective a bit. And I wanted to take some time out and do other things, and use my brain a bit, plus a bit of space on the farm between my dad and I, and just focus on life. And I got offered a job to develop Australia's first ever human-grade fish oil capsule out of salmon waste. And I went to tour this factory, and it was epic. Like the smell and just crap hanging off. There was crap hanging off the roof and juice, and it was just rancid. And you're like, how the hell do you do this? And I got back in the car with this Greek guy, Jim, who was really good at negotiating. And he said, you can barrel them, mate. Like, you've got the skills to do that. That's a hardcore site. Just ask for this. I'll get you a good deal. And he did. And so I wanted to do a postdoc job. So I ended up starting that as a postdoctorate researcher in business sponsored by the federal government. And I came in to build this human-grade fish oil capsule, and then it built out from there. It was a fascinating job using all my skill sets, from fabrication to oil chemistry to environmental remediation, the whole lot. It's and I had 7 years there, and it was part-time, so I was still working on the farm all the time. Always had that bad addiction.
That was one of the things I was pointing out. Like, making fish oil capsules sounds pretty romantic as another job, coming from farming background and thinking, oh, that would be good just sitting in the shed or something. But when those sort of carcasses are leftovers of what you're actually doing, a little less so on the romantic side.
Oh, it's as bad as picking crutchings. People look at you picking crutchings or something. Oh, you dirty dog. It's it didn't worry me too much. So it was, and I could see the value proposition and the sustainability question in it. Otherwise they were just dumping it. And I thought, well, that's such a waste. And once I learnt the long-chain omega-3 story, which I knew through my PhD, that was a philosophical proposition for me. Yep. I could solve this. I had the skills to solve it. Numerous people had failed in front of me. And so I came in and went from that into wastewater management, odour control, bit of fisheries science. So the company also ran fishing vessels. They bought the world's second biggest fishing trawler, bring that down to Australia to fish for small pelagics. And that was a fascinating lesson in how science means nothing in politics. The minister looked us in the eye and just said, I don't care about the science. I care about public opinion. They don't like this. I'm stopping the vote. And by sunrise, they had. And it was, as a scientist, that fundamentally shook me to the core. And I thought as an ag scientist as well, it's scary that can happen on something that made sense on a sustainability point. And the young guys that owned the boat, the Dutch boys, like I sat down and had dinner with them and said, why should I support this? I'm a seventh generation farmer. Why does this stack up? And they ran through it. And once I understood the global fisheries ecology and politics, I was like, I'm all for this. And it's so much like farming, fishing. It's just primary production, same game.
Yeah, I'm super keen to get some fishermen onto the podcast just to sort of open our worlds up. But those similarities, I'd imagine they'd be all there, trying the supply chain of getting it through and seeing what you can do. With what you did with the byproduct, that's a very cool thing. And that value add, be it different going into human consumption for fish oil capsules, or like what they're doing to farmers milling their own sort of wheat, lentils and everything like that. I think it's pretty cool, that sort of circular economy, what's happening, what we can do with waste. And there's a fair few things on farm that I feel will change in, I don't know, next 10, 20 years properly, in that sort of, to create that circular economy.
Yeah. Well, like for me, silage wrap's one of these ones that drives me up the wall.
That's what I was about to say.
So I did some math. I got in with a mate. We did some maths on it all and worked out, what we needed to make frills out of it, what other products we could do at the same time, stripping copper wire back and that sort of stuff. Like the waste economy is epic once you get your eyes open to it, and there's a lot of money in it. The job offers I was turning down when I came back to farm full time, it's like four times, 5 times what I take home now. Why'd I do it? I have asked that question a hell of a lot. Why did I come home? Like that's been probably one of my biggest challenges in returning to ag.
Especially like coming from that sort of background, now in academia for yourself, people must ask you that question a lot about why would you go back farming when farming is just like the people that don't really finish school, that's the perception of what they are. They wear flannels and overalls, that sort of stuff. That's the image that we have, and nobody sort of stay farming. But a lot of us return to the farm, bring back your skills and what you've done. Whether you're still sort of in farming, dealing with fish oil and turning into capsules. What did you learn through your doctorate? Do you think that's been best for you on your family farm?
Biggest thing I learned, a PhD is just an apprenticeship in science. So you really learn the craft of science. And the biggest thing it taught me to do was think. And it sounds so cheesy, but it taught me to look around me, look at everyone, analyse each person, and not be afraid to be wrong. Yep. And so, you learn to do a literature review, but then you can also look at what you do with a different set of eyes. And once you add data to it and have the skills to quite powerfully analyse it, it all comes together. And some people say it's a waste that I came back to the farm, and I'm like, no, I use that skill set nearly every day in this business, and I love it. And you can make farming as hard and as silly and as complicated as you want, or you can pull it back to bread and butter fundamentals. And a few mates, one of them calls me a smart dumb such and such, whereas he's just a dumb smart such and such. And he left uni and went home, and he kicks massive goals farming. And that's the thing about ag, like the skill sets and how people piece it together is fascinating, and what makes it so good. You can have guys that no form, very minimal formal education, and you watch what they do, and they've read their landscape, their animals, or their crops, and just nail it. They're on time, they're fundamentally just rock solid, and that gives you 80% of the gains, I think.
Yeah, certainly. I think I heard on another podcast today about there's innovation with ag tech and everything, but there's also innovation working with your environment to a certain way. For those probably older ones, being able to deal with the droughts, pretty innovative ways to bounce back from those and actually go through them for however long a period it is.
Yeah, totally. Like it flogged my old man. we're a heavily diversified business through the 80s onwards. So we started deer farming in Australia. We had the first deer farm. We killed on farm, sold to restaurants direct, that full vertical integration. That had an Nuffield scholarship. Travelled Europe with that, came back, we started milking sheep, making cheese, sheep and goat cheese, growing strawberry runners. So we grew 2 million strawberry runners a year on top of, 20,000 odd sheep across across multiple sites across Tasmania in a big family partnership, and had that bread and butter element. And those 90s, you had to pull that belt in and weather it. I think the biggest friction point now is when the times are good, rebuilding what we had they sort of built in the 70s and 80s in those heydays. It's a challenge, and that's one of the things I battle now is rebuilding that asset base kind of into that bread and butter farm. So we were just so diversified, growing all these boutique vegetables and garlic and horseradish and all that sort of stuff, and it's so hard to scale. That's one thing I've done is contract back to a bread and butter style business.
Simplifying it for sure. So let's talk about your operation on farm. What's it look like? What do you have? You've got a few interesting crops there. You're running some sheep. Like, keeping up with your stories is pretty fascinating because you chop and change here, left, right, and center.
Yeah.
You're just fixing your pivot's wheel before again.
Yep.
Tell us about the operation of it all.
So right now, I'm sort of scaling it back up into a sheep business. I'm joining about 7,000 ewes a year. Out of that, there's 2,000 merino ewes on a farm that I'm sort of leasing and buying at the moment back out of the family. And so I'm phasing that out for simplicity. I love wool and it breaks my heart to do it, but last year I didn't put merino rams out. So they're producing sort of 16.5 to 17.5 micron fleece. Hard work to manage, put across a terminal sire, and then we're joining kind of 5,000 odd prime lamb style composite ewes to produce fat lambs. So the lamb fattening business is kind of the core business. The bulk of that's done under irrigation with irrigated fodder crops. So I have about 350 hectares to 400 hectares of irrigated country, mostly under pivots, and then some flood irrigation as well. And the dry land pasture base, I've been working very hard to try and elevate that stocking rate. So I've tripled the stocking rate of the property in the last 5 years, focused on rebuilding that, bringing down that cost of production. The variable cost is fine with me, but once I had the overheads in, I had a business that struggled. And so trying to build systems around that. So the irrigation lambs are okay under pivots. It's dicey if you make money. In our benchmarking group, they just shake their head and say, why do you do it? But it's part of a rotation. So to make that irrigation country pay, for us, it's poppies are probably my apex crop. So where I can do, 3 to maybe 5,000 if I get lucky a hectare gross, which helps pay for that capex. And then we'll have a barley rotation in it and a fodder crop like a brassica, so rape, or those leafy turnips hybrids, and some lucerne and clover, which are rest phases. So it's a 4-year rotation under each irrigation block. And we have about 200 deer, fallow deer still. So we're down to about 100 running around now. And they're taken down to an abattoir and slaughtered for the local market.
What sort of abattoir processes them?
Dootan, it's called, down at Eagle Hawk Neck. So they've got to have a set license for game killing. So kangaroo and emu and ostrich and all that sort of stuff. But deer are pretty easy to kill. They like a sheep. Fallow deer is all allowed in Tasmania, so you only get like a 24 or 25 kilo carcass. The price hasn't changed in the last 20 years. It's still $5.50 a kilo. And it's a beautiful meat, but the venison industry just has never really skyrocketed, not like the Kiwis. But, we made a fortune selling breeding stock. That was a very profitable business in the 90s and stuff. Pardon?
The mainland as well, selling.
Yep. Some, not much. So there's a lot of farms over there, but all around Tassie, when the industry really kicked off, it was, in the 90s and the heydays, it really pumped. And we bought farms off it and vehicles and school fees and all that jazz. And that's the farm was so complicated. Like Dad and his brother Peter two very bright buggers, worked hard, and it was everything to them. And I just can't do that. Like, I don't even live on farm, so I'm trying to build this simplified business. Yeah, focus on just composite use. So phase those merinos out. I could rebuild it if I want to. I'm gonna miss wool so much. Like, at shearing, you do all the composites, and then the merinos come through the shed, and you just
yeah. Like the lanolin getting knocked off.
Yeah, and just the texture. That's just soft wool, and I mean, you're a Dorker man, aren't you? But like, I like it. I love wool, and I did a fair bit of work in the wool supply chain, auction houses, and stuff as an undergrad. So that stings, but I need to just wean one species of sheep and focus. So, and that's pulled the entity out of our business. Pulled the core out of it, and there's so many things to do and look at in such a complicated business. It really pulls you down. Like, you end up just going crisis management. And so, I've worked really hard business-wise to strategize on bang from the buck. And been really diligent on that. And it's been a big turnaround, and kind of clawing out of it now, clawing out of that CapEx phase and development phase. Big pivot being built at the moment, that'll come. So, it's exciting times.
On the podcast, I always speak about like optimizing over sort of scaling, like buying more land in. It sounds like you've sort of optimized the land that you're working with. How did you find optimizing it opposed to sort of scaling out? You wanted to simplify what was going on and control what you have currently. 340 hectares under pivots. Is that what led you to be able to increase your DSE?
No, the biggest impact I had was changing the dry land footprint. So I think 2,500, 3,000 hectares sort of dry land here as well on the farm. So that's the total footprint. For me, it was my business ethos that really resonated was grow the weeds you've got, eat the weeds you've got, then change the weeds you've got. So, and for me, it was after 4 droughts, it was all weeds, annuals. So fertiliser was the first thing. I went around the whole farm, soil tested, ranked every pasture made a scale for that with fences and pasture base aspect and soil, and ranked them, and then went fencing. So my big thing I wanted to do was buy a post driver and just start eating the weeds you got. I mean, that's just fences that hold stock, allow that rotational phase, and then the final step's changing the weeds, which is pasture renovation, and it's damn expensive. But when you get those new pastures in, it was breaking the camel's back, knocking out those paddocks with a long fallow for a pasture establishment phase. That was the bit that created a lot of tension and a lot of anxiety, because it's like we need to break this cycle and then get it in. And the paddock that carried 5 sheep now carries 25. And, and there's hundreds of hectares like that now. And then, it's the same ute, the same fences, the same laneways. So bringing that overhead cross burden down. These big old farms have so much of it.
It's a bit of a game changer to go from 5 to 25. Would you say like that workload, obviously you're handling more sheep, but has the workload increased more on you?
No, I think it's gotten better. I'm not dealing with like rock star chefs. I dealt with them all the time growing up, selling them ingredients, and it's cool. And orders and all this boutique stuff that we were doing chewed up so much brain space. And then coming back and saying, right, I'm just going weaning. What do we need for the next 5 days? Some lamb marking gear for the ones we miss, some 8-in-1, some multi-min, and some dretch. And you're just into it. And that's it. Yeah. And you're not jumping back to go and dig orders for the shuffle is disappearing, and then that brings in timeliness. I think, key profit driver is doing things on time. That, and I was always rushing or pushing or compromising to get things done, but it just takes years to break the back of that stuff. I found that really hard. You work so hard, and you just like genetic gain and all that change. I've really worked hard on, and it just takes so long to get it back. And it's been a really interesting journey for me in that regard, is looking at my business through benchmarking data in particular, and then kind of really hyper-focusing and having the guts to really push on it, like really spend and go out on a limb to get there.
Yeah, I think if you don't put yourself out there, go out on that limb, you probably won't get it. Get the results that you're sort of looking for. You can hang back so easily in farming and just sort of get the results that you've been getting, and like that's steadily increasing as the markets increase as well, as the protein prices go up. But if you really want to go for it, what you've been doing, you may have only gotten 10 if you didn't try, but now you've got 5 DSE. That's pretty unreal.
Yeah, well, that's the some of the jumps you can get, but the whole, just lifting the whole farm DSE from 2 or 3 to 9, that's just what you got to do. But to do it and see those strategies, for me, the big thing has been lamb growth rates. I've been focusing on very heavily. So, I was putting a lamb on a pivot circle with the same feed as everyone else around me. They've got sheep with high genetic merit and a few other management practices, and they're doing 200 plus grams a day, and I'm sitting at 50. But I actually didn't know that because I didn't have a sheep handler and a set of scales, because we can't afford that, that ethos, and you can't change what you don't measure. So that then dragged back. My winter stocking rate was through the roof. And you can look at it, and the classic for me was I halved my winter stocking rate, but my cost of production element that I pulled out on those late lambs, a few $100,000 back into the business. But it's taking the time to find that, believe in it, tease it out, and then push towards that goal, which is, it's been a key focus, is that lamb growth rate, trying to be empty. And it all went to shit last year, to be totally honest. The sun didn't come out, lambs didn't grow, and the damn things were still here in November, and it's done. Yeah, but that's fine.
Catching a good break now of the sun. How's the weather been down there? Has it been pretty wet for a Tassie summer?
It has been a really good summer. Last year it was wet up until sort of late November, then it just stopped and the soil went to a brick. And I watched the mainland, and you guys just got flogged. But that wet weather never pushed onto us. So we had a long, dry autumn. But leading to this one big rain, touched up my poppies. Waterlogging is a big key issue for me. And then with cropping soils. And kind of got in, just kept tickling the rain along. The irrigation season's been pretty kind, not desperate like it has been in prior years. And so, crops look good and healthy, and a lot of yield potential out there now. But as I've learned, you don't count it till the money's in the bank.
Exactly. So to get all these jobs done, what sort of labour on the ground do you have? Who do you have to work with you? How's your...
labour's been a big thing for me. So traditionally I've kind of had one guy or two. Trying to have 2 at the moment. I can't quite make 3 work. Balance the key pressure points with contractors. So land marking contractor, sowing time, we'll bring in the guys with good gear and just ease that workload on us. I try and do that where I can to ensure timeliness. And just 2 guys full time. Weekend work's been a bit of a killer with irrigation, trying to get guys to commit to that. And you add in these linears, that we've got 2 linears with dry swings and stupid walks and stuff that, they can stand there on a Sunday morning for 2 hours and they can't get the ready light to come on, and it can be something simple or something incredibly complicated. And so I've phased them out of the business. I've just put a big 13-span pivot in to wipe 2 of them out. Just anchored to a lump of concrete. It can't go through the fence. It can't hit a tractor. It can't, runs on electricity, and that's been hard. But that weekend rostering system's been a challenge. I tend to work pretty hard. I don't live on farm, so I live in Hobart, an hour away. I when I'm here, I go hard and fast. Which, with the people I've got around me, I'm very focused on safety. I want people to be there tomorrow with all their fingers and toes and healthy, happy, and in 20 years' time, they aren't cursing working for me because they were doing hard manual jobs. Had a pretty bad workplace scare 2 years ago with a young guy, crushed and whatnot, and that mortified me. I'm pretty passionate about teaching and building people, and I was a flying instructor and that sort of stuff in gliding, and like to build complex processes and help people get into it and do it well and safely. But getting the paperwork side of that done was challenging for me. Just sort of hadn't done it, and I was so intimidated by it. But I think it's one of the best things I've done now. So I bring a new staff member in, full inductions on day one, mission statement of the farm, all that stuff that I was doing anyway in corporate work. applying it to the farm. But gee, I found it hard to do. I found that so it just intimidated the hell out of me. You felt intimidated that you're doing the wrong thing or didn't have it right, and just getting it down and started was the key, and bringing people in to help me with it.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't be the only farmer out there that felt intimidated by bringing on these different practices and like the processes to get in place. Once you have them in place, you're sort of set and ready to go, and you can react a lot better to the scenario if you're bringing someone on for seasonally, even casually, or you're looking for a full-time worker, how much easier it makes for you.
Yeah, and last year I kind of had a bit of a staff shuffle and recruited, and it didn't go smoothly for me, to put it mildly. And I was pretty much on my own, in the sheep yard, 16-hour day, weaning on a Clip-X with 3 dogs, and just tweaked the whole race, the whole system. I just tweaked and tweaked and tweaked till the bloody flow. And just there with the drench gun and the needle, just chink, 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 punch out 1,000 a day, and then go around and do all the other farm work. And then you bring a new staff member in, inductions. 3 or 4 weeks later, they go, or they decide it's not for them, or that's just that really highlighted the strength of bringing in staff, doing it right. Yeah. So I went and got a bit of help on that as well, and I don't think I do it very well yet, but yeah, how to recruit, how to ask the right questions when you bring someone in, empowering them, but also that firmness that you've got to bring in as well, and that leadership element, not make them a mate. I'm a very, very chatty, sociable bloke, so yeah, having that, creating that ground where I can say, no, look, let's review this and let's talk this through, and what are you not happy with? What am I not happy with? What are we both happy with? And I'm learning that skill set.
I don't know if you listened to the podcast much, but Stuart Wesley, I told it at like People and Culture on Farm, and that was a huge hit end of last year, leading into Christmas, when no one really wants to listen to a podcast, and I was quite surprised. So there's a huge appetite out there for like the communication to employees, but also us family farms as well. That was huge to see the reaction off the back of that and what that is, and a little bit of what you just touched on there. Yeah,
I've got that there, and went through it, and totally resonated with me as well. And I find when I get together with farmers, the big thing we talk about is staff, retaining staff. And with this new millennium style generation, that are going to be transient, how do you bring them in and let them go again without it super impacting you, but also helping them get the most out of them, plus you get what you need done. And then family structures and that sort of stuff. It's when my brother died, he was totally different to me. I was all about the ego of 7 generations and land and titles and all those crude measuring sticks. And then when he died, he was the opposite. He was into photography, surfing, experiences, winemaking. He just had Christmas in Europe, just traveling, living in a tent, eating horse meat, just having a drink, And I was dogging away, and at his funeral, we buried him on the farm, and there's 500 or 600 people in the paddock from all around the world, all walks of life. And I sort of clicked then and looked hard at succession and thought, well, if you take care of the people on top of the ground, the rest just follows, is sort of what I found in my soul searching couple of years, going around meeting and looking and observing people that got succession right, got their growth and wealth strategies right, and also had good staff and good businesses. So going in and asking those questions, that was the take home for me. Keep people, take care of people from staff through to family, everyone. Bring them in, make them feel empowered. Don't make them feel like shit. Nobody likes feeling like that. And Ag's so prone to it. We're a brutal bunch in some ways, but in other ways, we can be the most fun you can ever have. Night out in the town with a pack of farmers.
100%. And looking at that way too, like farmers also, we're so busy being busy, and we sort of don't have the time to set up these processes up. How did you manage to set that time up to make sure you have a process for your inductions and everything? Like, it's just a piece of paper, it could be, or you actually got a bit of a program there. How did you get that time, or whatever it may be for you?
I decided I had to. It was the art of not giving a stuff about stuff going wrong out in the paddocks. I kind of developed that ethos a few years ago, where it's very easy to go chase that last little bit, where it's like, nah, they're there, bugger it. I've got to go get this workflow done. I've got to get bills entered. And so locking out that time to do it, bringing in a consultant as well. So you set aside that time, but it's so easy to put it off, and you can put it off for a month, and then it goes to 6, and then it's 2 years later, and I should really do that. Locking out that time and being diligent doing it is something I've learned that I had to do. Like, part of my job, I can't work in the business, I've got to work on it. And it's easy to have that mantra, but then why am I working in the business flat out? Have I not created workflow or strategies or got machines where my staff can just go work without me? And I'm getting better at that. And letting guys build themselves and give them the confidence, but then build those resources around it. So rather than me going out and dogging myself on building a fence, I'll go out and make videos of the knots I like, how I do it, write down a workflow. And there's an interesting chap here in Tassie called Ram, who's an Indian dude. His family were farmers in India, where they're treated a lot differently. And his father died, left them with a lot of debt, and he knew everything about the business with their plantations. And he kind of came home and went back to India and basically created this great whole ethos, workflow business style approach. And he's then put it into ag as well and applied it to that back in Tassie. And it's really good. Like, I kind of haven't paid his big bill to do it, but I'm been building a similar system myself, and seeing other friends and other peers get the benefit out of it helps me set aside that time to do it.
It definitely. Like, if you're fencing, you've got, everyone loves and has their own type of putting in a strainer or tying off or something like that. In marketing, there's a product called Loomly, and you can leave it for like your colleagues that you work with to follow that process. Like, if it's a bit repetitive sort of work, they can follow that if they need the guidance as well if you're not there. Have you actually set that up?
Yeah, getting there. Yeah. So I've changed staff again. I've just brought a new guy in a couple of weeks ago, and so inducting them through that process, using a Google Doc place instead. I previously had YouTube playlists in particular, were very good. And then I just text those through when they're doing those jobs, or leave links to it. Trying to create those docs. And my cousin, he showed me how he did it with a sheep handler with one of his staff members, showed me the video, and I'm just like, I've got to do this. So I just started creating the videos, writing out the documents, and I'm just trying to get it all into one neat, centralized Google Doc, hot doc. And the new guy that I've got in, he's very familiar with that, with the farm where he's just come from. And so, together we're just piecing that together to make it work. If you launch something half-assed, I'm worried I won't get that take-in on it and utilisation. And we're going to get it done this year. Like, that's our big goal for the year. Yeah. So you don't have to ask questions, you don't have to ring all the time. You can feel empowered that you solved the problem.
Yeah, once you get over that glut, that initial, like, instead of having the back and forth of, what did that mean? And you didn't quite finish it, whatever. There was an episode in Ag Worlds last year as well about this. Turner Smith actually gave everyone the resources, bought them all an iPad so they could get the ag tech on there, and actually, like, giving them the resources and having an iPad in the tractors. A bit of a cool thing if you're a younger worker or anything in agriculture, and you can get to tick off what you do, or you say, this job, I passed a limb that needs to be picked up, sawn off or something in a macadamia farm. And I think those sort of processes are huge, just to get past that little barrier of uptake for your staff as well. Whether you've got...
Yeah. So I use AgriWeb, and I think that was one of the best things I did. I used the task function in that and assigned to task members, particularly feeding out jobs and that sort of stuff. And did the map. Like, when you do the map, and I went through the gates, I was up to like 435 gates. It's like, no wonder my guys get confused. I'm like, how do I have so many gates? Every farmer never wants to swing. But like, you can just say, go to this paddock and go to gate 235 and leave it open. And all that stuff to streamline it. All my pipelines in there, with tap points, where pipes go, where isolation valves are, troughs, weather stations, all that is really good. And that's why I want this to feed into my hot docs style approach. And because I've done the safe works procedures, but I found no one got on Dropbox and used them. So on all my safe works procedures are major hazards, shut down, clean down, operational, all the things there. They're good documents. But yeah, and before you use a machine, you get inducted on it. But going back and pulling that document up, I don't see that interaction. And so a big part of what I do is remote sensing on the farm, like the ag tech side of it. Because I don't live on farm, I don't get that feedback loop of the nighttime on the business. And it's taught me I've got to have things that are robust and work. And, the other end of the farm's 14 Ks away, and I've got a 160 hectare pivot down there as well. So another cropping block there, cropping block at the main farm. Yep. And when I'm sitting at one end of the farm, I've got no idea what the other end's doing anyway. So I've built my own Wi-Fi mesh across the property. So sort of 2,000 hectares of Wi-Fi because there's bugger all phone reception, but that enables everyone to make video calls. I run cameras on all my pivots, gateways, pump sheds, fuel houses.
On your main gates, I hope. You don't have a camera at all 485, surely?
No, not quite that mad. Just the key ones where buggers can come in and out. Yeah, we catch them. It's interesting what you see and who's about. That helps with security elements. But just watching irrigators, like particularly these linears, I can lie in bed or be out at dinner or something and just quickly glance at the camera, see it's in the wheel rut and go, okay, it's good. I can relax again. Whereas in one way you get that anxiety, where is it, what's it doing, is it going to hit something? And then because I'm quite a tinkerer, I went and made all my linears Wi-Fi control, so I can now control them on the phone and sort of talk to Sparky. I said, I've got an idea, I've got this thing and I've done these antennas, and so if I do this on this wire, will that switch that? And yeah. So then we just, $500 versus a $15,000 bit of tech. We've got automated valves and gates and lots of stuff, automated lights that I can turn off. You see the shearing shed lights are on, just on the phone, whack them off.
Do you have gates in laneways or something that are automated for the sheep?
No, just some key ones that I want to shut around for security and that sort of stuff. And yeah, that's kind of thing. And laneway gates, I've been looking at those electric fences that drop off that you can then fire on a timer. I was looking at making those Wi-Fi controlled. I mean, Wi-Fi is just great because it's such a high bandwidth. Everyone's phone connects to it. You can stream YouTube while you're ploughing late at night or sowing, and it's just, it makes life a bit more bearable. FaceTime your kids and still work. People can call you everywhere. Because that was one problem. You go down the other end of the farm and no one can get hold of them. And you come out and the voicemail pings for about 20 minutes down the road, and then the texts are all there, and Snapchats and Instagrams and
good to see. Well, you actually took my question for me, but if there's any others, let us know. What ag tech have you implemented into the farms? You've got AgriWeb probably as your livestock and also land past management.
Yeah, and cropping management. So all my cropping records, that got that off the Trimble GPS. Use Trimble Auto Steer quite aggressively. Love that for everything from cultivation, sowing, spraying, the lot. I like that element of it. I use a lot of UAV technology, so I do have a drone company as well doing precision ag work. So we do variable rate. I've got variable rate irrigation. I do variable rate fertilizer applications and crop measurements, and drainage is the other big one. So I use that precision ag space quite heavily. The Wi-Fi network is awesome for remote sensing. So that's primarily cameras and switching. So just menial tasks, going out, turning an energizer off or something, you can now do it on your phone. That's great. I've got moisture probes, so I use EnviroScans. They're great. So 80 centimetre probe every 10 centimetres, I can see temperature and water availability. And I've got those through my irrigation blocks. Weather stations as well, good quality, meteorological grade weather stations. I actually do that as a community gesture and let everyone else log in and look at the weather, so I can see rainfall around the farm, weather, what's happening, wind, fire danger indexes.
How many people log into it? Do you know?
There's about 15 or 16 users. Yeah, particularly if they're in Hobart and it starts to rain, or they're a shack and they think it's going to rain. But yeah, and they're in it every day, like using it. So a lot of that weather data is great. So that's, again, remote sensing. FarmBot, I really like FarmBot. It's a simple system on water tanks. My old man's always hated water troughs, reckons they're no good. because he was flood irrigating all summer, so he didn't really need them.
Yeah.
But yeah, the automating that watering system's been magic. So I can watch it on FarmBot, turn it on with my Wi-Fi network, shut the pump off as required. Once it's full and it texts me, I just go on the phone, chink, pump off, or shut a valve. If I've got a leak, I can isolate various components of it and just say, in the morning I can put a task in and say, look, there's a leak below the shearing shed. It's probably this trough. Let's go, we go solve that. That situational awareness is what I'm chasing. What else do I use?
I've seen on the stories that you solder up a fair bit as well and have a bit of a tinker on a few.
It's a lot of stuff.
I thought it was pretty cool what you were doing.
Yeah, fixing up a camera. So yeah, security camera just failed. It was like $400 camera. So just pin it out, figure it out for 10 cents of solder, and we're off and going again. So I got right into the drones right in the beginning in 2011, and then got into drone racing pretty heavily. Racing little mini quads with the goggles on and looked through it. Had a viral video on YouTube with it. Sold it to one of those media houses, and they got a few million views out of it. I on auto steer, put the goggles on and fly the drone straight out of the tractor cab, fly around the cab and land back on the roof. That was in 2013. So it was
that's back in the day for drone imagery.
Yeah, and so we started mapping 2012. We got, I went and bought a bloke a beer at a uni talk that I knew through my flying, and sort of said, "Oh mate, you've got all the licenses, but you're gonna do some ag flying with me." And Kyle, my business partner, is one of those guys that goes and does it and tinkers. So we bought 3D printers, CNC machines, built our own drones. Like we built Tesla batteries, so we could have Tesla style batteries, these lithium ion slow discharge batteries to fly for. We had multicopters flying for an hour and a half. 2013. We could get around an 80 hectare pivot circle, get the imagery. We built our own GPS mesh, like our own RTK corrected mesh across Tasmania. So we still use that. But yeah, the drone stuff, I've always had a curiosity for electronics, but you're always fixing stuff when you got drones. So yeah, build it. And I still use drones a lot. That's the Phantom 4 Pro. I love that. Just the big legs. Mavics are nice, but yeah, the big legs, you can land in the grass, whatever. It's quite crashable. I chase a lot of sheep with it and gather with it quite often. And going up and just taking photos. Like it's interesting in precision ag. Precision ag, all you're doing is drawing a line, like a really accurate line around a problem the farmer already knew he had. That's all we're doing. But getting them to action it is the key. Getting that uptake of it. Like we did thousands of hectares of a crop for a company and gave 100 odd growers full access to it, like from bare earth right the way through to harvest, yield maps, total NDVI imagery, the whole lot. And out of 100 and something growers, 8 logged in and looked at the data. And the bulk of the stuff they did on it was draw pivot circles. They would look at the picture, then drag the map across next door and draw a pivot circle or something. Yeah. So it's interesting to see the sandbox data on what farmers did when they got in that space. And so I consulted on a fair few precision ag projects. Like our company got ahead. It got ahead because we joined the dots, and I got people together and amalgamated and talked through problems. And then, we can do that. We can go drain that paddock. So like, Kyle, let's build a drone, photogrammetry. What do we need? How do we make the model? How do we then translate that to a TopCon system or make a yellow machine do something? And we just joined the dots and collaborated. And like the first big drainage job I did, I kind of thought the guy was taking the piss when he said, come map my whole irrigation development. And he rings up like 5 months later, where are you? And I was like, I thought you were joking. That's a big job and a big quote. And then we did it all, and then it got 120 mils of rain, and then the phone rings, and I'm like, I've got to answer this. So, g'day, how you going? And he goes, we love you, mate. The water, it's just amazing. It's so good. And I was, blown out by it, and then once you start getting those results and the confidence up, you start doing it, and you go to a farm and the farm hands will call you Jesus because you can send water uphill. And you're like, no, mate, that's downhill, trust me. And put it in tractors, get a rig around it, make it happen. And I enjoyed that space a lot and still do it. Like the guys are on Barrow Island at the moment doing magnetic survey, flying 7 meters above the ground. They're and there with the mining companies. So we do a lot of mining work, unexploded ordnance detection, media as well, movies and ads and that sort of stuff. It's a good industry. I don't do much flying anymore. It's a lot like electronic horse racing.
You need we'll have to do a farms advice ad down from Tasmania then.
Yeah.
So
good fun.
Down in Tasmania, you must have 30 hours in your days. We've only got 24 here in New South Wales.
Yeah, a lot more daylight because we're further south, you see.
Yeah.
So we point towards the sun more. Yeah, I'm a bugger I punch out the work. Like I set a pace, and it's probably my downfall in some ways, but also a strength is that hyper focus I've got. But yeah, I can juggle stuff. Probably sometimes the detriment of business. That's one thing I've had to learn is say no. So that's why I don't go flying anymore unless it's a really hard job. But yeah, kind of keeping out, and I've learned now I don't do anything unless I'm going to get paid for it because my business is going to suffer. From boards through to events to whatever. I really had to say, if I want to go do something else, I got asked to chair a committee at the moment. The other day I got asked that. And I said, well, it's going to take time. It's only 4 days. I said, okay, how do I eliminate 4 days out of something I'm already doing, get rid of 4 days to do this extra thing? Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. And learning that juggle has helped me find that what looks like 30 hours in a day. When I stay at the farm on my own, it is a bad habit where I'll just work. I'll go out the door at 7 and finish at 10 or 11 at night and just punch it out. I usually enjoy it. But yeah, and then when I go home, I'm home. That's a tricky one. That's hard.
I think though it is enjoyable, so you don't sort of notice. For those that like come in and out or just come newly fresh into the industry, my partner's hasn't been in agriculture all the time, and just probably to understand like why haven't you finished past 5:30, sort of thing, or why we can't go into town right away or whatever. Just those sort of understandings. But before we wrap it up, because we're good time managers now as farmers, do you think that's a bonus living in town, sort of detaching yourself?
Yes and no. I'd love to have the kids up here more. Like we do have a house up here and things that we can stay in. But it has really taught me to build those robust systems. And it's also made me look at the day and go, if I can't get it done in 12 hours with my staff and my resources, what am I doing wrong? Like I'm doing something wrong. If I can't come in and get my kids ready for bed and stuff and then have the night with them and my wife, what am I doing wrong? Why am I going out and checking an irrigator or something? Can I put a camera on it? Can I put a switch on it? Can I remote sense it? And the fact that Hobart elements really taught me that. And also just stuff it. Kids' birthdays, we're going away to Derby. We should be weaning. Let's go. Kids are never going to look at you and say, gee, Dad, I wish you had more hectares. They're going to say, gee, I wish I had more time with you, mate. So, yeah, practice what you preach is always hard. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, when I get home, not being a grumpy sod, I think it's the hardest challenge when you just know you could nip out after dinner and do it in 20 minutes. Yeah, I think it's a strength for me. As much as I'd love to live on the farm, I don't. So it's the card I'm dealt. I've made my peace with it.
Absolutely. It looks like you're doing pretty well off the back of it. So for yourself, throughout your tinkering away at nearly everything under the sun, what would be the best piece of farms advice you've received?
It was that one of basically grow the weeds, eat the weeds, change the weeds. That was the strongest bit of grazing advice I ever got, I think.
That's a really original. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it might have been Sandy McEachran, I think, told me that one once. And I'd heard it in New Zealand as well. And my grandfather kind of pulled me aside and told me all that stuff when I was diversifying heavily and in that phase, like it was our image. And I looked at it and I could see what he was saying. He took me through his ledger. And a couple of peers and mentors, I'm a big believer in mentors, took them for drives through the farm. And they all said the same, look at the potential. It's like, okay, let's just start buying for get it on strategically with soil tests, variable rate, whatever. And that's really resonated with me.
Absolutely. And to finish it off, what would be a piece of farms advice you'd like others to take away from this episode? A bit of it.
Never be afraid to be wrong. Don't be afraid to be wrong and be challenged. Don't take that as a threat. Take that as an opportunity to go and learn and build yourself up. yeah, we're all wrong. Yeah.
100%. And I've learnt more so doing this podcast. So put yourself out there, I reckon. It's not a bad thing at all. So Will, thank you so much for coming on to Farms Wise Podcast. We'll leave your details up in the show notes. Thought Farm. Are you anywhere else other than on Insta?
Insta's the big one that seems to work for me. There's Facebook link as well, but Instagram's probably the main site to find me. Twitter doesn't work in my head. Just don't gel on it. I get on there and I don't know, my brain just doesn't click. I get lost. So yeah, Insta's the main one. A lot of what I do, I don't put many photos and videos up. I mostly do the stories.
Yeah.
Get a few thousand views of those a day, and my wife and kids and everyone can know what I'm up to, and people get a good laugh out of some of my stuff. It's all there. All.
I've seen a bit of humour come through in a few of your activities that you get up to, either on farm or off farm. They're pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting, the cooking. I love my cooking, and that gets huge amount of interactions and traction for content. It's crazy. People start asking, what are you cooking this weekend? But I've always liked my cooking, and that's a bit of a relax for me, a bit of zen time. But yeah, and you sort of share that, but then the next day you're back in the sheep yards, and it's just sharing family life. And I think the what's and all side of farming, it's interesting how many people don't quite comprehend the level of commitment we have, the risk and physical hurt that comes from it, and also the mental anguish. I mean, I'm pretty open about my mental health, that I battle with it, and those elements of it, and the support I got last year was really epic from Instagram and social media. It really connected me, made me feel a bit more connected than isolated.
Yeah. Plenty of people going through similar things in Australian agriculture, and we just sort of need to be a bit more open about it and let people in, and also let yourself be a bit vulnerable in that. And you have been on the podcast, so appreciate it muchly for coming on and sharing your piece of farms advice.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
This Farms Advice episode does not stop here. Come and join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, and even join our Facebook group. Go to farmsadvice.com.au for more on this episode and spread the hashtag FarmsAdvice to your mates. If you can leave a review on Apple or Spotify, that will let other farmers find us too. But until then, see you next Tuesday. In the spirit of reconciliation, the Farms Advice podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people today.